Let's talk to Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of British troops in Afghanistan. Richard, it's good to see you. I'm just wondering your reflections. Watching proceedings yesterday where those MPs who had served alongside you in Afghanistan, you understood from them, from their manner, from what they didn't say, from as much as what they did, the severity of where we're at. Do you think the politicians get it?
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Obviously, they don't have the same experience as the members of parliament who actually fought in Afghanistan, but I think they do recognise that there is a big problem on their shoulders, and I think they're doing their best to ensure that most of it is deflected across to the United States of America, where actually the blame for what's happened really does lie. I think we also have a considerable share of the blame ourselves, both in terms of the extent to which we may or may not have attempted to influence the American decision to withdraw unilaterally, and secondly, the extent to which we and our intelligence services and our armed forces did or did not assess properly what was happening. There seems to be a great deal of surprise, which probably needn't have happened if there'd been a proper handle on what was going on within, particularly the Afghan National Security Forces. Plus, the chaos of the evacuation. I think, as you mentioned earlier on, that perhaps the odd phone call here and a bit more urgency there would have speeded up the evacuation. We wouldn't be seeing quite the scenes in relation to Britain that we're seeing today.
What did you, Richard, feel about what Boris Johnson had to say yesterday? What did you make of the debate in general, the criticism from former MP Theresa May said it was incomprehensible the UK was not doing more to maintain a presence there? What have you made of what was said yesterday in general?
Well, I think, first of all, my opinion is that, while people like the Defence Secretary have said we would like to form, I tried to form a coalition of NATO members, not including the US, to remain there. I don't think Britain has had any political will to remain in Afghanistan for a long time. I think politicians are absolutely terrified of what happened in Afghanistan and in Iraq over the last 20 years, and are extremely relieved, and were extremely relieved when President Biden decided to get out. So I don't think they didn't want to be there, and they certainly won't go in there again. And I'm sure they would not have allowed a British-led coalition, even if that had been possible. I don't think the strength of our armed forces today make it possible. And I think they're kind of the contrast between the direct understanding and possibly a bit more emotional response of those MPs who'd served in Afghanistan with the more matter-of-fact attitude that was taken, and I think there was some pretty sort of casual remarks made during the course of a number of speeches by government members, and I think that that sort of tells a story, I think, of the difference between someone who's been there and understands the problem and someone who hasn't.
In which case, can you pick up a point that a lot of people are emailing us here at GB News about this morning? And what they're saying is, hang on a minute, the Afghans had an army that was trained over 20 years by people like you and of course, Americans, by Allied soldiers, trained for 20 years for a moment like this. And when it came, not only did they not stand up and fight, they actually swapped their uniforms and ran. And there must be some responsibility with the people of Afghanistan.
Yes, of course. But I think, first of all, there was some quite heavy and tough fighting that went on in some of the cities. Not all of it. A lot of the cities fell without a shot being fired. But some of these soldiers fought and died very hard in the last few days against the Taliban. And in fact, over the last 7 years alone, 50,000 Afghan soldiers have died fighting the Taliban. President Trump accused them of cowardice, basically, which I suspect is not true, because they did fight and they were very brave in some cases. But these are not British soldiers, they're not American soldiers. They depended very, very heavily on Western support, and they depended on Western firepower and Western logistic support and technical support, but above all, they depended upon the presence of Western forces there. And I think the minute President Biden announced that he was going, he essentially ripped the rug out from under their feet and sent the morale down to and beneath the ground. And morale is so important when fighting. If you believe you're going to lose and you're going to die, then there's the ability to fight effectively is reduced. So I don't think you can't in any way compare these soldiers to British or American soldiers. They're probably on a par in terms of their combat capability with the Taliban. Yet the Taliban are obsessed. The Taliban are absolutely committed to fighting and victory. And these Afghan soldiers weren't so much. They were well trained, yes, but they weren't. They didn't have the same commitment as the Taliban, and their morale was shattered by the decision to withdraw.
Richard, let's just talk about women, the treatment of women. I mean, the Taliban have promised to observe human rights and to not disrespect women or treat women badly under the Sharia law. I mean, we're already, though, hearing of deaths, of rape. We know the Afghani women are fearful. I don't know if you've heard the reports, you probably have, of British troops having to deal with the fact that women are trying to give them their babies over the barbed wire at the airport, to give them the freedom to come to the West, to give them a life. I mean, what's your reaction been to this and the fact that, yeah, as I say, the Taliban said this wouldn't happen?
Yeah, these are absolutely shattering scenes, and I think to an extent reminiscent, for example, of women giving away their babies when they were being taken to the gas chambers in Auschwitz. And these Taliban people are the new Nazis. They're the Nazis of our era, and I don't believe one word of what they say, what their spokespeople say to the Western media. I think the Taliban hasn't changed in terms of its viciousness and brutality. It's changed in a number of different ways, but not in those terms, not in terms of its absolutely rigid demand that everyone adheres to Sharia law. I think the way they've changed, above all, I think, is they've become media savvy. So they know how to pull on the heartstrings, how to manipulate the thinking in the West, which is important at the moment. I think what they want now is they don't want any possibility of Western forces remaining in Afghanistan. They just want them out. So I don't think, I mean, some unintended incidents could occur in Kabul in the current situation, but I don't think they will, as a policy, deliberately try and impede the evacuation at the moment anyway, unless it goes on for too long. But this is all part of it, making the West think that there's no reason, there's now no reason at all to stay. Whereas in different situations, there could be possibly a change of heart and a decision to remain at least for a bit by the West. But I think you're right that we've seen plenty of scenes. We've seen lists given to, or we've seen demands given to the local elders in some cities and villages, saying that they must give lists of girls over the age of 13 to become brides of their Taliban fighters, and this is exactly reversing to the way they operated in the past.
Any interview where we invoke images of Auschwitz, you suddenly realise just how horrendous what we're facing is. And just to stretch the Second World War analogies, we're also looking at a Dunkirk moment, aren't we? We're looking still at many people who are desperate in need of getting out of there. And that operation seems to be, well, there was one flight that left last night with hardly anyone on it. There are still issues with that.
I think there is chaos in parts of Kabul, and it's been extremely difficult, as I understand it, for our soldiers out there to get some of the people anyway out from the city into the airport, and some of the National Armed Forces operating out there aren't actually leaving the perimeter of the airport. So that's held up. That both of those factors have held up the problem. And of course, although the Taliban may not be interfering with the actual troops in the evacuation, they're no doubt what they're doing is interfering with some of the people being evacuated. They want them there. They don't want them to go. I think they will let some go in order to, as I mentioned, to appease the West so that we don't have any second thoughts. But they want blood. These people, they want vengeance. They want revenge. They've had family members killed, the Taliban fighters, and as well as just the general principle of it, they want to kill people. They will be hunting down now. They are hunting down now in Kabul and in other places. They're hunting down former members of the administration in Kabul. They're hunting down human rights workers, women's rights workers, anybody who worked with the British forces, journalists who have been working with international media organizations. They want their heads basically, and they will have them in many cases, unfortunately. There was a journalist I heard speaking yesterday in Kabul, an Afghan journalist, who said, "We've been in paradise, we're about to go into hell."
The motivation that you're talking about is the very motivation that led to 9/11, and that has to be the fear, that those that aren't attacking people on their own soil are going to be getting on flights and taking the battle to the heartland, to the West.
That's certainly the case. Taliban and Al-Qaeda both have, I beg your pardon, Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State both have a strong presence in Afghanistan, and some Al-Qaeda fighters have been fighting alongside the Taliban during recent days. There's no question that the Taliban will give them freedom to operate, and they've already released thousands of very dangerous jihadists from the prisons. So we will see a growing threat from there again. And there's no question, as they've done in the past, that that Al-Qaeda, Islamic State will have managed to infiltrate some people onto some of these flights coming out, leaving Afghanistan and coming to Britain. These are not fools. They're clever people. They know what they're doing in some cases, and they want to launch attacks. So there will be some people among the Afghans coming out of Afghanistan, I'm certain, who pose a threat to us, particularly as the vetting, etc., of some of the people being evacuated has been extremely difficult to do. And then secondly, there will be jihadists around the world will be heavily influenced by what happened in Afghanistan. They've been celebrating already. Not only Imran Khan, the president of Pakistan, who celebrated the victory of the Taliban, but also jihadists everywhere who will be inspired, motivated, and re-energized to attack in the West.
You do lots of interviews on lots of channels around the world. I know that. We all have our set questions. Are we missing anything?
I think, I've, as you mentioned, I've done so many different interviews. I think one thing that's often not talked about is the enormous threat that exists of jihadists getting their hold of nuclear materials from Pakistan. Now, we know that Pakistan has been the primary supporter of the Taliban in terms of arming and providing funding and giving practical support for the Taliban. We know that. But the presence of the Taliban with jihadists at large in Afghanistan, free to operate in Afghanistan, will lead to destabilization in Afghanistan, greater destabilization. There's already a strong insurgency in Afghanistan to bring down the government. If that's given greater power from Afghanistan, which it might be, then that does significantly up the risk of nuclear weapons, nuclear material in Pakistan falling into jihadist hands, which has been the greatest fear of any intelligence specialist since 9/11.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.